Hi there, and in today's video I want to talk a little bit about three anti-patterns, three ways that you can corrupt your way of working into a place where it actually can be harmful for your organization rather than beneficial. I'm not doing this video to bash any particular way of working. I'm just doing this to show you three ways, or to talk to you about three ways that I commonly see organizations fall into a trap where they get stuck on things. So the three anti-patterns we're going to talk about today are the cult-like attachment to a way of working, where people stop being flexible about how we actually can and should work, with the mindset that you have to follow a specific written way of working to the letter, even if it doesn't work. The second anti-pattern that we're going to look at is the user-first trap, where we detach ourselves from the organization and focuses outwards only. And the third and last anti-pattern is self-isolation, usually in regards to self-organizing teams. So with all of that in mind, let's jump into the first anti-pattern. So the first anti-pattern is the closed mind, where we have an almost cult-like attachment to a way of working. This is common in mostly in agile ways of working, actually. So if you are looking into teams that do Scrum, that is usually where you find a mindset that becomes corrupted, so to the point that they would rather follow the written word of the agile Scrum guide rather than looking at what the team needs. And this is bad in many ways, because in one way we are locking ourselves into a way of working that doesn't really exist. I'm going to have a whole video on Scrum later on and why it's a bit of an emperor's new clothes situation with Scrum. But the more dire situation is that people are often very creative and they have very good instincts on what works for them. So by locking them into a way of working that may not fit the team itself, you can actually make the team less functional, and you can also make it less efficient, and you can make a lot of frustration happening in the team. So if you notice that people would rather give you comments like we need to be self-sufficient, or we need to be self-organizing, or it is not our fault that management are not agile, and stuff like that, that's when you usually end up with someone that has a closed mindset and they are focused solely on one way of working. While if you have teams that go the other route, where they will start with a way of working, a framework or a methodology, and they use that as the base, and then they will build upon that with what works for them. That's when you have a healthy and a good team that can iterate and find new ways that make them more efficient and make them have more enjoyment in their work. So be wary of the closed mindset of people that will advocate for just one way, or then go to hell basically if you're not following that way. So be mindful if you end up with a situation where you have one or more team members, or even if you build a culture in your organization where people will basically ostracize anyone who suggests anything that goes against a certain way of working, and when it becomes more of a religion rather than a way for you to build upon the way of working that works for you. The second anti-pattern, the user comes first. That one is a little bit more tricky, because it should be obvious for everyone that the most efficient way to actually create value for the company or the organization that you work for is to make sure that the people that pay you and that pay the organization actually feel that they get value from your products. So the anti-pattern is not to focus on the customer, and it's not because they are focusing on their customer's need. It is when they detach themselves and they forget that At the end of the day, it's the organization or the company that you work for that you create value to. It is not the end customer per se, because the reason you focus on that is because it is in the best interest of your organization or company. So what happens when you stumble upon this anti-pattern is that you will have individuals or you will have teams that will not only forget about the organization or the company, but they will actually start resenting anything that comes from within the organization or the company that is not in the best interest of the end users or the customers. And this is dangerous because there are many scenarios where the company's interest should go first, and one of the most obvious ones should be that if you have a new feature or a new functionality that you know that the end users will love, but it costs more to build than you will actually make money of, and then it's not in the best interest of the company anymore. So then you have to listen to what the organization or the company say, and if they say this is cost too much, we understand that this is something that our end users or customers want, but we can't afford it. So can we build something similar to a lower cost? And if you have an anti-pattern, one of the corrupt versions of the end user's first mindset, then that person will become very angry and very upset, and they will start resenting the company. If your team, on the other hand, understand that it is the company and the organization they work for, and they do this by approaching the customer first approach, and that generates good value for the company, and they can take the criticism or they can take the decisions that sometimes goes against the customer first principles, then you have a team that is mature and that understand properly how to use the user first principles. But if they, on the other hand, will start to detach themselves from the organization and becomes more isolated, then you have a problem. And that problem can grow quite a lot, especially as we move into the third anti-pattern. And the third anti-pattern is common in Scrum teams. And the reason it's common is because Scrum is written in such a way that it sounds like teams should be their own organizations, basically. They should have all the mandate, they should have all the power. This is an illusion, of course, because teams are the ones that build things. They are not the ones who decide what to build. They are not the ones that have actually any mandate within the organization. They are the performers. They are the construction workers. They are the people that actually make things work. So if you end up in an anti-pattern where the teams will start display, I call it illusions of grandeur. They think that they have more power than they actually do, and they start to resent management, and they start to isolate themselves, and they stop documenting. They only communicate within the team, and rarely they connect to anything outside. They talk only inwards, and they basically create their own little snow globe. Then you have an anti-pattern that will actually strangle the collaboration within the organization, and any form of steering or financial insight will be very difficult to maintain. So the opposite of that anti-pattern is, of course, teams that take their own lead and that self-organize, but they do so knowing where they exist within the organization. And they do this by connecting to other teams, and they make sure that they provide the information that management needs, and they ensure that they create value not only to the end users but also to the organization in form of information. And this often comes with things like estimations and also progress, so they can report progress, and they can be as fast with presenting this information inwards as they are to produce value outwards towards the end users. Now, I'm not saying that you should go crazy and every team have to document everything, that they have to make time estimates. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that they should provide whatever the organization needs. So if the organization needs time-based estimates, that is what they should provide. And if they have a good reason why this doesn't make sense for the team, they should speak up about that and maybe have an exemption. Because there are plenty of teams that are kind of isolated. They have small systems that maybe are not that important to align with other big initiatives. Maybe they are just a small cog in between other systems, or maybe they have a rather isolated ecosystem. But what I mean is that the team should have that conversation with the organization to make sure that they are a good fit with what the organization needs. And I know this is difficult for many teams. There are plenty of organizations and companies that have a very bad management culture that is filled with things like micromanagement or blame culture and stuff like that. But that's another topic. You shouldn't make the situation worse by self-isolating. So those are the three anti-patterns that I see. So we have the cult-like attachment to way of working, where we become narrow-minded, closed-minded, and we constrict our way of working to a dogma that might not be very good, especially not if you have teams that prefer to work in other ways. The second anti-pattern then is that the user comes first. When we take that to the extreme and we forget that the reason why we build for the end user is because that is the most efficient way to generate profit and value to the organization or the company that pays our salary. And the third one is self-organizing teams that becomes isolated. They self-isolate and become small snow globes or black holes within your organization. And that is directly opposed to how we want to work, where we want to collaborate across multiple teams, where we want to have a free flow of information within the organization. So these are my thoughts on these three anti-patterns, and I would love to hear if you agree or disagree with me. So please leave a comment, and if you like this kind of content where I talk more about ways of working, then please subscribe to this channel because I'm going to have more of that coming out soon. And we will also talk more on how ways of working connects then to Atlassian and to their products. So that was it for today. If you have any questions or if you have any comments or requests on things that you would like to have me talk about, then just leave a comment about that. If you would like to discuss this in more detail, then jump over to atlastic.com where I will have forums and blogs and stuff like that for this topic. And until we hear from each other again, I just want to say that I hope that you have a really great day.